Let us take a journey through history and meet every president of the United States, their time in office, and one important fact about their presidency. George Washington, 1789 to 1797. George Washington, the first president, served from 1789 to 1797. He set the tradition of serving only 2 terms. John Adams, 1797 to 1801. John Adams, our second president, was the first to live in the White House. Thomas Jefferson, 1801 to 1809. Thomas Jefferson authored the Declaration of Independence and made the Louisiana Purchase. James Madison, 1809 to 1817. James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution, led the nation during the War of 1812. James Monroe, 1817 to 1825. James Monroe introduced the Monroe Doctrine, warning Europe against interfering in the Americas. John Quincy Adams, 1825 to 1829. John Quincy Adams, son of John Adams, fought against slavery after his presidency. Andrew Jackson, 1829 to 1837. Andrew Jackson expanded presidential power and was known for his populist style. Martin Van Buren, 1837 to 1841. Martin Van Buren faced the Panic of 1837, a major economic depression. William Henry Harrison won 8-1. William Henry Harrison served the shortest presidency, only 1 month, before dying of pneumonia. John Tyler, 1841 to 1845. John Tyler was the first vice president to become president after the death of a sitting president. James K. Polk, 1845 to 1849. Image, portrait of James K. Polk. James K. Polk expanded U.S. territory with the Oregon Territory and the Mexican-American War. Zachary Taylor, 1849 to 1850. Zachary Taylor, a hero of the Mexican-American War, died only 16 months into his presidency. Millard Fillmore, 185-01853. Millard Fillmore signed the Compromise of 1850, temporarily easing tensions over slavery. Franklin Pierce, 1853 to 1857. Franklin Pierce's presidency is remembered for the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which worsened sectional conflict. James Buchanan, 1857 to 1861. James Buchanan is often blamed for failing to prevent the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, 1861 to 1865. Abraham Lincoln preserved the Union, issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and was assassinated in 1865. Andrew Johnson, 1865 to 1869. Andrew Johnson oversaw Reconstruction and was the first president to be impeached. Ulysses S. Grant, 1869 to 1877. Ulysses S. Grant, Civil War hero, worked to protect civil rights, but faced scandals in his administration. Rutherford B. Hayes, 1877 to 1881. Rutherford B. Hayes ended Reconstruction by withdrawing federal troops from the South. James A. Garfield, 1881. James A. Garfield served only a few months before being assassinated in 1881. Chester A. Arthur, 1881 to 1885. Chester A. Arthur pushed for civil service reform, signing the Pendleton Act. Grover Cleveland, 1885 to 1889. 1893 to 1897. Grover Cleveland is the only president to serve to non-consecutive terms. Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893. Benjamin Harrison signed the Sherman Antitrust Act to regulate monopolies. William McKinley, 1897-1901. William McKinley led the nation during the Spanish-American War before being assassinated in 1901. Theodore Roosevelt, 1901 to 1909. Theodore Roosevelt expanded national parks and built the Panama Canal. William Howard Taft, 1909 to 1913. William Howard Taft later became the only president to also serve as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Woodrow Wilson, 1913 to 1921. Woodrow Wilson led the U.S. during World War I and proposed the League of Nations. Warren G. Harding, 119-3. Warren G. Harding's presidency was marred by scandals, including the Teapot Dome affair. Calvin Coolidge, 1923 to 1929. Calvin Coolidge, known as Silent Cal, presided over economic prosperity in the 1920s. Herbert Hoover, 1929 to 1933. Herbert Hoover was president when the Great Depression began. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. Franklin D. Roosevelt served 4 terms, leading the U.S. through the Depression and World War II. Harry S. Truman, 1945 to 1953. Harry S. Truman made the decision to drop atomic bombs on Japan too. And World War II. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1953 to 1961. Dwight Eisenhower was a World War II general and launched the interstate highway system. John F. Kennedy, 196. When 1963, John F. Kennedy inspired the nation, but was assassinated in 1963. Lyndon B. Johnson, 1963 to 1969. Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and created Medicare and Medicaid. Richard Nixon, 1969 to 1974. Richard Nixon opened relations with China, but resigned after the Watergate scandal. Gerald Ford, 1974 to 1977. Gerald Ford, never elected president or vice president. Pardon Richard Nixon. Jimmy Carter, 1977 to 1981. Jimmy Carter brokered the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. Ronald Reagan, 1981 to 1989. Ronald Reagan, a former actor, helped end the Cold War with his leadership against the Soviet Union. George H.W. Bush, 1989 to 1993. George H.W. Bush led the U.S. in the Gulf War against Iraq. Bill Clinton, 1993 to 2001. Bill Clinton oversaw economic growth in the 1990s, but was impeached, though later acquitted. George W. Bush, 2001 to 2009. Image. Portrait of George W. Bush. George W. Bush led the nation during the 9/11 attacks and launched wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Barack Obama, 2009 to 2017. Barack Obama was the first African-American president and passed the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump, 2007 to 2021. Donald Trump focused on America first policies and was impeached twice. Joe Biden, 2021 to 2025. Joe Biden, our 46th president, focused on COVID-19 recovery and major infrastructure investment. Closing scene, image, portrait of Donald Trump, 2005. Donald Trump returned for a non-consecutive second term as the 47th president, inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. He became the second president after Grover Cleveland to serve non-consecutive terms, and the first to serve while holding a felony conviction from George Washington. To Donald Trump's second term. Each president has shaped the story of America. Which presidency impacted you most? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical deep dives.